Hey, welcome back to the Shift podcast. As always, I'm your host, Anthony Trucks, and today we have a guest in Dr. Alex Wills, who, man, this guy has got a great depth of understanding of the emotions that we have. We all have these things going on inside of our brains and our bodies that trigger us to do stuff, and sometimes our logic brain shuts off and we act out of joy, we act out of sadness, we act out of anger, and so understanding how to navigate these emotions that we can't get rid of, but we can actually use for positive is a necessary skill. And so he talks today about a 5-step process to be able to go through radical emotional acceptance, which is a very interesting thing when you think about it, because if you can truly understand your emotions and navigate them properly, you can take a massive control of your life, your relationships, everything going on, because everything creates emotions based on experiences, and how we respond to those create our life. So as you go into today's episode, I want you to pay deep attention to the conversation we have about these aspects of life, humanity, and where you can extract these 5 steps and apply them into your life. And then also, as always, I want you to make sure you go and grab Magic Mind, magicmind.co. And if you use /shift, you get a discount, or go to magicmind.co, use the code AWSHIFT to be able to check out. Because I found that for me, there's a cool nuance to my brain and how it works. And when you fuel your brain properly, you can control your emotions better. You can control your energy better. You can control your honestly, your competency better, because I can pay attention and learn and listen and do so much more, which allows me to have success in my life. You know, that is one of the greatest assets we have, is our functional ability to think, to process, to be intelligent. And that comes from your brain. But if you're not giving your brain this amazing vehicle the gas it needs, well, it'll bog down. And so Magic Mind does a great job of creating an amazing product that's all natural for that purpose. They actually have a new batch, a new 4.0 version that came out that tastes great, absorbs quick. It's even better than the last stuff. So make sure you go to magicmind.co /shift, or go to magicmind.co and use the code AWSHIFT at checkout. Let's go. Hey, so you already know who this man is, because you just heard about him. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Dr. Wills. How you doing, man?
Not bad. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I wish I had the doctor name in my title, but I'll never have it. Never, never. It's one of those things, like, hopefully one of my kids becomes Dr. Trucks, but it's not going to be me. And my wife, she got her master's. She's like, I'm done with school. So we're good there. Let's get into this today,
I'm
man.
not sure. I'm not
Huh?
sure if it was worth it sometimes. So.
Yeah, really? Why? Why would you say that?
Nah, it was a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice for a long time, but yeah, definitely worth it at the end of the day.
I got you. I mean, it's cool to be able to say you're a doctor. We have people in our family that say that they're a doctor, and we have no idea what school they went to, or like where they're from, a different country, kind of. They call themselves doctor, whatever. And we go, nobody knows if they're actually a doctor. So I'm assuming you wouldn't just throw it out there if you weren't, but nobody asked any questions. Here's the question I start the episode with. It's a genuine, just curiosity question. You can frame the answer however you want to. Here's how it goes. Say I'm walking around town. I sit down at a coffee shop. You happen to be there. I don't know you, but I sit down next to you. You, for some reason, feel like the urge to talk to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
Wow, that is a great question. I guess I would hope that you'd be curious, and I'd be curious to kind of get to know you, like, maybe a little bit of a deeper level than just you know hey stranger kind of a thing. I definitely like to go deeper in conversations with people. I'm not really a big fan of kind of the surfacey stuff.
Yeah.
I get bored pretty easily, which is a great job for me in psychiatry, because you meet people and they go really deep really quickly,
Yeah.
and they tell you stuff they've never told anybody before. So I guess I kind of like that level of engagement.
I dig it, man. Have you always had that? Is that something where, because those are conversations, let's be honest, most people aren't are open to having, or they taught how to have. So where'd you develop the skill to even have those conversations, let alone the desire to have them?
Yeah, I guess I've just sort of always been interested, psychologically minded since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I've always just been fascinated with, why do people act like they act? Why do we feel like we feel? It's always been this great mystery, and like the deeper you get, the more mysterious it becomes. So it's like the gift that never stops giving.
Interesting, because I know this is that there's something to having those deep conversations in the stance of developing great relationships, also. Because I mean, for me, like I wasn't a guy that talked a lot in terms of like emotions and behind the scenes, and I don't think the place I grew up it was heavily accepted. You know, you're the guy. It's like, hey, stop asking those questions. You know, don't go there. But I do know that the people I am closest to, deepest bonded to, are the ones that I can go to those root core levels. Why do you, I mean, is there any studies or something that shows that the depth of my ability to be vulnerable creates a depth of connection to a human?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's the Brene Brown stuff out
Oh
there.
yeah, yeah.
There's the emotionally focused therapy for couples, and the research is so robust that if we choose to go vulnerable and deep right away instead of defensive and putting up our
Mhm.
shields, then we can disarm the other person. Like we're tapping into their mirroring neurons on like this physical level where we can actually sort of evoke empathy from people with those of us that actually have empathy. There's some exceptions, as we know.
Yeah, yeah, and I do know, but part of that's scary though, because what if what if you go deep, you expose something, you're vulnerable, and then it's supposed to somebody mirroring you in a positive way, they use it as a tool against you. There's what they like. I think narcissism would be kind of as the person that kind of narcissistic human that might do that. Is that something people should worry about, or are they more apt if you share something deep to share something also deep?
Yeah, well, that actually hits on a core concept that I talk about, which is all of the emotions we have are actually good. So, for example, fear.
Hmm.
If you're having a fear come up that, hey, if I'm vulnerable with this person, they might use that against
Yeah.
me, then that's a very valid threat to be aware of. And so we don't want to maybe go throwing our deep personal stuff around willy nilly. We want to maybe make sure that we're going to have somebody that we trust that we talk to about
So
it.
that's an interesting thing because how do you develop the trust, right? Because we're saying to develop the trust, you got to go deep, but it's like
Yeah.
you can't go deep until you have the trust. So was there like a chicken and an egg here? Like which one's the first step you take towards? Let's say I meet somebody new, we're hanging out, I don't know, at the friend's house, and we're now mutual friends, and it's like I'm in this new circle trying to enter it, but I don't know these people. What's the best way to enter new situations and conversations with people? Do you listen to their conversation and add to it? Do you start a conversation? Is there actually TMI? Can you share too much?
Yeah, great questions. I think the approach I take with my patients is to test the waters. You don't have to, plunge in right
Mhm.
away. You might share something a little bit vulnerable, a little bit personal, and see how they handle it, how they respond.
Mhm.
And if they respond in a way that develops more trust, then you might take another risk. But you're right, it is scary. And that's part of life. It's although it is scary, there is fear. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it,
Mhm.
but we should be aware that okay, there's some risk, but it might be worth it. It might be worth it to take the risk
Yeah.
and win a friend,
I like
perhaps.
that, man. It does make sense because I think there is a risk to it. And I think for me at this point in my life, I've realized I can survive the crazy. Like if somebody does decide to, do something, say something like, nah, I've been through worse. I can navigate that. But for a lot of people, that's deathly like scary to go, well, what if this person then says something and then I could lose my job or I could lose my friendships? I think that becomes that barrier people put up and they walk around with all day long. But I
Right.
do know for your work, it's about giving a F. Like the book coming out's about, how to give F. Is that correct? I want to make sure I said it right.
Yeah, yeah. Give a F actually
Give the
is
F
is
actually.
the title.
There
Yeah.
you go. And that's, I mean, at face value, I kind of get it, but it's interesting because you do operate in this world where it's like, oh, you look great and you're amazing. But God forbid you tell somebody the truth that isn't amazing or great. But there's this kind of wall where people, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm venturing off in random thoughts, but to say I want to give a F actually, what comes from that may be something you don't actually want to hear. How does something actually give a F, in that space without actually damaging a relationship?
Sure. And for the listeners who may not kind of know exactly what that means, kind of use the F bomb as a colloquial term for like emotions.
Yeah.
And the concept is that we don't need to think of our emotions as a problem. If we realize that all of our emotions, the scary ones, the painful ones, the happy ones, the disappointing ones, they're all trying to help us, then we can make the best decision based on our emotional wisdom. So sometimes the correct choice is to maybe not say anything and not to act. Or perhaps it is to be daring and to say something too.
Yeah.
But you're going to make the best choice if you're tuned into your emotional wisdom.
Okay. So and then I like that because I think there is something to the emotional wisdom. I think some would call it intuition or like, awareness. And I think it's just repetition of having conversation, engaging like somebody's response, even their nonverbal cues to really get a feel. But I think there are two sides of the coin. There's a side that says, I give a F, I show up, it's all beautiful. And there's another side that's like, I give a F, and hey, you're doing something that's hurt your marriage. It's going to hurt your parenting, or it's going to hurt your body or your health, right? So look, I want before we go to the back end, I think this would be more fun in that dark one there. Let's talk to the positive side. How can somebody in today's world, we'll say, show up in ways that make it clear they give a F actually about somebody?
Yeah, I think it can be, big things and small things. Making someone else aware of what your emotions are is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you're at work and for whatever reason you're not having the best day, and you decide to let your coworker know that I'm just kind of I don't know, I'm just kind of feeling a bit down and feeling a bit grumpy,
Mm-hmm.
without even explaining why. That coworker then might feel more drawn, more close to you. You suddenly become more human to
Yeah.
him, and you have a opportunity to have more of a real relationship instead of, oh, I'm fine, and put on this kind of fake front like we do so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. That's good because I think there is that happens a lot, man. People just say I'm okay, I'm fine, and I think that leads to vastly more, I think, enjoyment, connection, fulfillment. I think even at work, because there are some spaces where people they're around everybody all day long, yet they're not actually connected to them. They end up going like, I didn't
Right.
know you were like that outside of work. So how does somebody dive into that? Because I think a lot of us have not been taught to be ourselves until we feel really, really comfortable, or to never be ourselves at all. Like we almost, it's like when you're there, you're this character. When you come home, you're this character. But I don't think that's the best way to pursue life, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. And when you first start living a life that's not emotionally suppressed, you're probably going to feel a bit
Yeah.
awkward. It's going to be weird and different, and you're going to get different responses from people. It's like learning to walk again.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some stumbles, there might be some regrets, and that's part of the course. But then after you start to gain more confidence, when you can allow people to sort of know where you're at, what your emotions are,
Yeah.
when it might not be the right person, the right situation. But it doesn't have to be a daunting thing. It could be kind of a bit of a game. You can have fun with it, and you can just sort of enjoy, experiencing life in real time.
Yeah, I like that, and it almost sounds like that concept. I think from what I gather, the book has something about putting down your F shield. Is that kind of tied to what you're talking about, like that wall that should be put up that keeps that kind of boundary between people?
Yeah, so the F shield, that's the first step in the 5 steps of radical emotional acceptance. And so a typical emotional shield is anger.
Yeah.
Anger is a very easy emotion to get in touch with, because when you're angry, nobody's going to mess with you because you're going to kill them.
Mm.
So it's very empowering. But behind that shield are these more vulnerable emotions. You might be scared, you might be hurt, you might be disappointed, you might be fearful of abandonment or something else going on. So the first step is to recognize when you are using a shield emotion, and then to, be brave enough to drop it and see what's going on, at least for yourself, underneath there.
Yeah, that it makes me think of an animal that's like in a. This sounds bad, but like an animal's in a trap, right? Whenever you go to help it, the animal's caught in a trap, and it comes off as aggressive and angry, right? It's very mean, but on the flip side, it's afraid of whatever's going to take place with this person that's unknown. So it's like it's. I kind of does that make sense? Am I in the right realm?
Right, right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But so I also look at this, and you said a moment ago, so well, you're in your space of being angry. People aren't going to mess with you. But I do realize I think that the world is a mirror to us. If we show up in a certain way, we kind of get that in return. And it's also, I think there's something to be said about when I show up in a funky mood or I'm angry and I kick that out. And then my coworker is also in an angry mood and they kick it back and it escalates. Like, does that happen sometimes also for folks? And should they be aware of that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, if I want to see your F shield, the fastest way I can do that is by showing you my F
Mm.
shield, and then we're gonna be mutually supporting ourselves, becoming more distant
Yeah.
instead of becoming closer together.
I like that, man. And then that I think that leads me to my question I wanted to kind of hold, but I think it's time. So there's always this way that I look at the world, and so when I say give a f about, I hear that like that language of tough love. I've always struggled with the tough love thought because tough love, I think, is just love, right? I think if you call it tough love, it takes away the truth of it. Which if I love, say, for example, my children, I love my kids. When they're doing something or interacting with someone or something's off or like they're wearing something that's funky and they look weird, they stink, like because they didn't take a shower because they're teenagers and they don't do this sometimes. For me to go up and love and be like, hey, look, you can't come outside looking like that, or like you stink. You got to take a shower, or maybe some with their hair. Like I'll be honest, now, I'm not trying to do it to demean them. It's not the intention isn't to make them feel bad. The intention is to love them enough to tell them what nobody else will tell them because they don't want to have an altercation. But in telling them, it'll change their life or help them in some aspect of it. So how does somebody do that? How does somebody handle the feedback from people who are showing up and they may gauge it as an angry F shield when really it's them just being like, hey, I love you enough to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, with parenting issues like that, it's very applicable and powerful to make your kids aware of your emotional state. If we come across kind of hard and of course we have good intentions, they might become, defensive or they might feel threatened or something.
Yeah.
But if we come across and say like, hey, buddy, like I'm kind of nervous. I'm nervous for you. Like I don't want the kids at school to make fun of you or to get a bad reputation, and share with them your more vulnerable or fearful emotions. That can really help to disarm them so that they're in more of a receptive
I
state.
like that. It's like tell them you care about them before you tell them something that makes their feelings hurt. I get it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could probably do it with adults too. They may not be as receptive to it. I think like, hey, I really care about you, but Karen, yeah, you need to lose some weight or, whatever may come out of your mouth or something. Cause that stuff just doesn't sound good no matter what it is. And adults,
Adults are just big kids
yeah,
sometimes in a way,
yeah, it's
right?
true, man. It's kind of frustrating. So you alluded to 5 steps, and I know that I don't want to take your thunder, man, but if that was step one, what is step number 2 to the 5 steps of radical acceptance? Is that what it was? Radical acceptance, you said?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 5 steps of radical emotional
Emotional
acceptance.
acceptance.
Yeah, I nicknamed it Ria. So,
Yeah.
my daughter Ria, putting it out into the world.
Okay. I like it.
Thanks. Yeah, so the second step is I try to keep them really simple. So it's just listen. Or, sorry, that's I skipped ahead. I don't even know my own
That's
steps.
okay. I don't know.
The second step is actually to name the F.
Okay.
So name your emotion.
Yeah.
Just identify what it is. I'm scared. I'm afraid. I'm disappointed. I have the emotion of hate,
Yeah.
disgust, or joy. Just name them. Use those emoji charts, and just kind of pick a face of like what your emotional state is at the moment.
What if you can't though? What if you can't name it? Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's times that I sit there and I go, Am I mad? Am I sad? Am I angry? I literally will have moments where my wife's like, what's wrong with you? I go, I don't know. I'm just a little unsettled. I'm not quite sure why yet. So how do you is
Yeah.
there a process you would go through to really clarify the emotion?
What you just said is brilliant because that is exactly what you should say, which is, I'm unsettled. My emotion right now is unsettled, and I don't know why. We get so fixated on knowing why, which is not validating just the pure
Yeah.
emotion. And so it's so important to say, hey, you know what? Right now, my emotion is confusion. I have some intense confusion.
Mhm.
And I know it's temporary, but that's where I'm at.
Gotcha.
And so we just keep it simple and name what's going on. And oftentimes, yeah, it's going to take time to kind of figure everything else out.
Yeah, I'm glad I figured that one out accidentally because I do. I seriously will just, and I don't even know what it is sometimes. She's like, "What's why?" And I go, "I don't know. I'm just something off," and I'll just sit with it. But I started doing that because I didn't want to have my bad day create a bad day for people around me. So if I'm in a funky mood or something, I want them not to think I
Yeah.
don't like them or I'm mad at them or something. I'll just I'll be honest, something's a little bit off. I'm not sure if it's a work thing or it's a personal thing. I don't know, because there's things that I feel like are in my subconscious floating and it'll happen and then it'll kind of kick its way into my conscious and I haven't figured out what it is just yet. It's like I smell a fish in a room. I don't know what it is. I'm like, I should be happy, right? I can't navigate it, but I guess that does make sense. What is step 3?
So step 3 is to listen
Okay.
to the emotion. Realizing that all of our emotions are only there to help us. We wouldn't be having them if they weren't there to help
Yeah.
us. So we want to become curious and we want to listen. We want to figure out what the emotion is telling us about our relationship, about our situation. And, Ria kind of flips everything on its head because we're going to start with the emotion and then we're going to try to learn from that rather than trying to start with our thoughts and our rationalizations and try to, start with our
Mhm.
stories.
I like that. That makes sense. So it's actually sitting and listening, and I mean it's good because if we don't, then I guess we can't figure something out. So how do you go the route of once you've listened to it? Like, what's the next steps? Not the step of the five, because I think there is a step that in my head I go, okay, I'm listening to it. Should I sit with it? Should I talk to somebody else about this? Is there like how do you kind of unravel now that you've listened to it? We'll call it.
Yeah, you just want to spend some time, being curious, listening, um, seeing what your emotional truth is telling you. You may think you have a really great, relationship going on with someone, but there just may be this emotion that comes up that lets you know something's not quite right. And to really validate, like, okay, I'm going to pay attention, and that might spur you on to ask more questions or kind of search deeper for other related emotions.
Gotcha. Okay. That doesn't make sense because I think they're all tangled in like a web. Do you find that the more you do this, you get better at navigating it? Like over time? I feel like I have some pretty good emotional control because I've been through crazy. Do you think that like the more you think through the logical aspect of the emotion? Because I've always heard that statement: when emotions are high, intelligence is low. Does that you ever heard it before?
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Um, yeah, I like analogies, so I'll probably use way too many analogies. So just tell me to slow it down a bit. But one of my favorite ones that patients seem to really resonate with is if you like to surf and you want to become good at surfing,
Hmm.
the number one rule is not to fight the wave. Because if you fight the wave, you're going to end up on the reef. You might drown. It's not going to be a pretty
Yeah.
picture. So if you imagine emotions are like
Hmm.
waves, there could be some tsunamis, there could be some, regular waves, and there can be some small waves. And some of these waves might be very happy, and some of them might be joyful, but some of them might be fearful or painful. And if you want to be a good surfer, you surf each wave as it comes. You don't control the
Hmm.
wave, but you go with it and you become curious about what it's trying to tell you or where it's trying to take you.
Yeah.
And then you switch to a different wave as they kind of keep coming and going.
Interesting.
So I think it's possible to be in the midst of an intense wave of maybe anger, maybe emotional pain, and yet still be at peace. Because, for example, when a loved one passes away, we have some intense waves of emotional
Yeah.
sadness, but that's also a good thing because we love
Hmm.
them, and so that sadness isn't a problem. It's something that we need to experience as part of the grieving
I like
process.
that, man. That's a great way of framing it up because yeah, they're a natural part of our humanity. I also it's just thought it's a way it's an offshoot, man. So bear with my brain because this is how I operate. Things come in my head and I go, let me ask that question. Uh,
I like
I
it.
find that when people are at higher levels in life, let's say just it doesn't matter what it is. Let's say you have a bigger business or more money or more opportunity, something you've climbed some ladders, no matter what it might be for people, your own version of success that comes with a certain level of stressors, right? And those stressors trigger certain emotions. And I find that some people who are at higher levels, they kind of have a very common sense or maybe a congruent base, I think, of emotional control that I find. It's the people who have a lack of understanding emotional control or situations they get too high or they get too low that seem to keep messing their lives up, if that makes sense, or never reaching the place they want. Do you find that the levels you climb, because everybody's emotions are relative, right? What happens to trigger you may not trigger me. Is there some consistency to those who navigate emotions and them climbing ladders in life to certain pieces? Because I feel like the higher you are, the more stress, the more emotions that could take place. If you can't manage those, you can't be up there.
Absolutely. In my own life, I've reached a plateau several times, sometimes for years. And um, I feel like I was able to kind of get to the next level really only through having a better relationship with my own emotions
Mhm.
and using sort of the wisdom of my own emotional intelligence to navigate some pretty tricky waters, so to speak.
Gotcha, gotcha. Because I would imagine that if like if I have some clients that are executives and I know some CEOs, and they're like, honestly, the only things that come to my door, the bad things, like everything that comes to my door is the problem someone below me couldn't solve. And it escalates to a point where only I can solve the problem. So they go, if I can't manage my emotions, then I have no ability to function properly. And I go, that does make sense. And so where you're talking to this, I go, yeah, man, if you really want to have success, it's not always the new whiz bang product or system or tool. It's like, can you manage yourself with this? Can you be the
Yeah.
person to wield that tool that, because if you can't, then it's kind of, I don't know, it's screwy. You never get anywhere. So what is,
Right. And the way I would kind of frame it would be, um, so most of the self-help books and stuff, when we talk about emotions, it's about fixing the emotions or managing the emotions or maybe avoiding the emotions. I like to reframe it into, if there's nothing to fix with emotions, there's no problem with emotions, then how can we actually use these emotions for our advantage?
Mhm.
So if you're a guy who has like a lot of emotions and you're a CEO, man, that can actually become your superpower. So I
Gotcha.
want to take this liability and turn it into your biggest asset.
Gotcha. How would you do that? How would you do it if a person has like let's say they fly off the handle every once in a while? How would you use that positively?
Yeah, so if there's some issues with anger, for example,
Yeah.
we definitely want to help them harness the power. I mean, I think anger is one of my favorite emotions because it's so passionate, it's so powerful. And
Mhm.
if we can utilize that energy in a positive direction, we can become assertive and we can do things that we weren't willing to do before because it can kind of push us to that next level of having the courage to act when it's the situation that demands it.
I can see that. Yeah, definitely can see that. There's things that make me mad, and I think my thing is because the emotion's there and it flies up. I realize I could do something in this moment that will probably not be the smartest. So my first thought, I always throw away when I'm mad, and then I go back. Okay, what would my calm self do? And I can't even think of that. I just let it ride, and then I do find that I get more calculated. I dial myself. I go, why am I angry? What bothered me? What's the best solution to solve this, to remove this, to fix it? So I can see that, but I'm not a guy that flies off the handle. I don't think I've ever had like anger issues, but hey, you never know. Um, what is step four? What's the four step in the five steps of emotional? Where was it? Radical emotional acceptance, RIA.
Yes, it is to act
Okay,
or to not act on the F.
interesting.
So, based on your emotional wisdom, your emotional intelligence, after sort of getting centered and validating your emotional experience, then you get to decide. Sometimes the right answer is to do nothing at all. Sometimes the right answer might be to fly off the handle. I mean, there are
Yeah,
situations that might require that, but you can make sort of the most emotionally informed decision utilizing the full wisdom of your emotional
gotcha.
intelligence.
Now, are there better ways? Like, are there any like strategies you utilize of how to actually process that? Because it's if it's for me to act on it, I'm just explaining to you the way that I did a moment. Like I would sit there, it would make me mad because I used to, when you're a kid, something happens, kid hits you, hit them back, they throw something, you throw something back. Someone cuts you off in traffic, you cuss at them, and flip them off. At this point, I can process it and go, I don't want to have anybody shoot me in my car. So is it worth me getting the last yell or the get in trouble for something crazy going on? And so I just kind of let it all pass. But how do you get to that level of operation and beyond that? Like, how do you get to the point where you're completely unbothered by stuff?
Yeah, to answer the first part, I think it comes from practicing leaving that emotional door to your heart open all the
Hmm.
time, so that no F's build up.
Okay.
Little F's, big F's, kind of come and go. Not meaning that you're being reactive or just kind of doing whatever you have like feel like impulsively, but you're being very present and aware of what emotions are flowing, right?
Hmm.
Um, However, the goal may not be to feel good all the time or not have things get to us. The goal instead might be to learn how to feel good. In other words, to be at one with our emotions, because just like those waves of the ocean, they're always going to be coming and going. That's part of life. That's not a bad thing. So if we can be okay with that, then life becomes a different experience. It could become quite enjoyable no matter what the emotional storm of the day may be.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I like that. It is. I think repetition is gonna be part of it. But also it's like it's navigating like you a moment ago. It said the fear aspect too. I think there. I just got a message from a buddy who has a job opportunity, And literally the exact language before I got on here, he says, I got this opportunity, want to let you know, he says, but I'm a little fearful because it feels like they have more confidence in me than I do. And I go, oh, okay, we'll have some conversations. There's something there, and I don't want to do your job, but how would you approach that? Because I think there are some moments where people go, okay, these fearful places I might step into to ask for the raise, to ask for the job, to start a new business, to ask that girl or guy for their phone number, right? How does somebody enter in with the fear of it, just in the first place, and then what's the benefit to doing it long term?
Yeah, and I think it's such a great thing that you have this relationship with your friend where he trusts you enough to be able to let you know that, hey, I've got some fear going on, right? And that's so huge. So what I find is people generally don't need my help, with advice about specifically what to do. I try to tune them into their own emotional truth and try to get them to find a lot of wisdom from that in order to make the best decisions. Because we're usually talking with people who are intelligent. They know common sense. They know what they can do and what they can't
Yeah.
do. But they really need that emotional wisdom component to make the right choice.
Yeah, that does make sense. That's good, man. Okay, so what is step 5 then?
Step 5 is to thank the F or find gratitude for whatever emotion's coming up because, and this is my favorite step. This is sort of like really the magic part. If you can find true, sincere gratitude for a disappointing emotion, a sad emotion, a scary emotion, then there's no longer a problem because you realize that that emotion is just part of yourself and it's trying to help you. You can end the war with yourself and then you can be whole to make the best decisions going forward.
Gotcha. That's not easy though, man. That's really because you're pretty much saying like, thank yourself for being scared of that thing, or thank yourself for feeling the anger that took place because you lost the sale and whatever it is. That's not a logical thing to do. As I mean, for me, I'm like, yeah, I've been injured in football and I've had games where I lost the game and I'm all down, and then I don't immediately go to like, thank you, Anthony, for feeling that. So, is that like a thing you have to like force yourself to do? Is there a way you can trigger yourself to remember to do that in time? Because I don't think that's something that I've ever triggered myself to do in real time.
Well, I like to think about, what if the opposite was true? For
Okay.
example, you use the example of I lost the big sale or
Yeah.
something, and you had a extreme anger and disappointment come up about that. Well, imagine if you're the kind of guy that didn't have any anger or disappointment. You would not be the guy that's going to go out there and get the next
Mhm.
sale. And so being thankful, like, hey, these
Mhm.
emotions are telling me, yeah, this is a pretty crummy thing that
Yeah.
happened. And it hurts because it's not good. It's not
Right.
the outcome I wanted. And so I should have these emotions because they're reflecting reality. And that's going to help me do better the next time and get my head screwed on straight so that I don't mess it up or I figure out what went wrong so I can have better performance
I
next
get
time.
that, man. So as soon as you said that, an example came into my head. So I have my son is 14 and he plays tackle football. And this last year, at the back end of the season, I kind of hopped on the coaching team and helped out. And we got to the semifinals right before the playoffs, or sorry, right before the Turkey Bowl, the final game. And we lost. Like, we lost by a touchdown, and it was a tough one, man. All the kids are crying because it was like we were battling, bro,
Yeah.
battling. And so I remember after the game, like, everybody had this weight of just deep sadness from losing, and the kids are crying. I didn't cry. Some guys were crying. I've lost big games. So I'm like, nah, I've been here before, But what I explained to them was this: I said, I need all of you guys in this moment right now to just remember how this feels. Like, breathe this one in. This, when we get back, I said, when we get to practice next season, this is what I want to recall every single practice. I want you to think about this feeling every time. So I feel like what you just said, would that kind of lead into the idea of thanking yourself for it, almost using it as a fuel for positive later?
I mean, would you want to be a coach on that team if they weren't crying? If they didn't care about losing that
Well, yeah,
game?
no,
You'd be like, I need some different players that
yeah,
care,
true.
right?
Yeah,
So that's, we want to celebrate all of the emotions because they're reflecting the truth, right?
yeah, that's crazy, man. Because you got to do something with it. So how does this turn in, like, let's say long term, right? If somebody can practice this long term, what have you seen people turn into? Is it the same thing? It's a little bit better? Do they have more joy, more happiness, more peace, more money? Like, what is the outcome of somebody being able to master this here?
Well, speaking from my own kind of personal experience, I thought that in life, there was just sort of a normal level of misery.
Mm,
And that's what it was like to just be a human on the planet these
yeah.
days. And I kind of accepted like, okay, there's good times, there's bad times, but overall there's a lot of just kind of like kind of yuck. But in my own experience, I have found that it's possible to get to a level where life is just easier. It's more enjoyable.
Yeah.
You can still pursue everything that you want to pursue in life or not. And once you realize that emotions are not a problem, then so many of your other problems kind of go away too, because you're no longer spending all this time and energy to try to make it to this level where you're like zen and just like happy all the time. That no longer becomes the goal.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. I don't think there is some space to it. It's yeah, it's Zen. It's like almost like the idea of life is a multitude of emotional experiences, and you kind of want to ride the wave of it all. It sounds like
Yeah.
it's good. I mean, because I mean, for me, it's like I don't want to be sad, but when I'm sad, it makes the joy more joyful. You know, I don't want to be happy all the time because I would buy stupid things and piss people off around me that aren't as happy as me. I'm sure. Um, that's great. So,
One of my favorite lines to say to patients is, I hope I don't sound like a sadist right now, but
uh
I'm so happy that you're sad.
huh,
And they kind of look at me like, what? What are you talking about?
yeah.
That's like evil. I'm like, no, because the sadness is telling you some really deep truth
Mhm.
about your relationship. Without this sadness, you probably would stay in this toxic relationship or whatever the situation might
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
you know?
So this is my brain kicks into this other thought too, because we're sitting here as two men that have obviously done some of the work. I don't know wherever that work might be. We'll just call it the work. I've gone through some crazy men. I've had navigated. I definitely have not been this open-minded or expressive as a human all my entire life. How do you enter in with people that aren't open to this just yet? Like they're almost, it's almost like they're addicted to the pain of the navigating of the emotions. Like they fly off the handle, they close off. Like, you know, it's the people you see that are the villains in movies, or like, you know, the dad that's, you know, abusive to the family, and like the woman who's verbally abusive to the husband. Like, these are people I feel when I watch them like they're battling something, but they're not yet able to hear this. How do you introduce them to it? Because I'm sure someone listening right now goes, I got some in my life that it would be great if they could have this conversation, but they're not open to it yet.
Um, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know. What do they say? Like three, one to hold, one on the ladder, one to hold the bulb, and I don't know, someone to tell them how to turn it. I'm making something up. I have no idea.
It's only one,
Uh,
but the light bulb has to want to change.
that was a
So,
good one, bro.
you know,
Well done.
thanks.
Yeah.
It's a classic psychiatry joke, but I'm in a very privileged position because people who come in here to my office, they're already kind of
Yeah.
primed, like they're ready to receive help. I kind of don't go around willy nilly offering my advice when,
Obviously.
people aren't necessarily ready, but
Yeah.
and that's another challenging thing with psychotherapy is, you're always looking for those kind of portals where you might be able to kind of help them maybe have a different perspective
Hmm.
change. It's a challenge, but I love that.
I like that. I mean, but that's true that people come to you, they're in that space, but let's, you know, someone's going to be at home with a friend or family. I've always been a person that tells people you got to plant a seed, but maybe not water it. It's like, let somebody know, hey, I recommend you go see this, call this, check this, watch this video here, listen to this podcast. And I think sometimes you can plant the seed, because I think no matter what it is we're talking about, in order for someone to change or enter into a discussion about what we are seeing, you know, having talking about right now, I think there has to be an ownership by them, an action by them. If someone feels forced to do it, there's an immediate resistance to it, and you've cut off the chain of the ability to serve that person or life. So you kind of got to drop it in there and hope they pick it up, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like we kind of discussed earlier, one of the things that we can do, and maybe the only thing we can do, is just make them aware of our emotion. We may be concerned that they're going down the wrong road.
Hmm.
We may be scared for them. We may be angry. Something that they're doing might be, hurting us. And so if we make them aware of our emotional state in a matter of seconds, it takes 10 seconds to make them aware and love, then that's very powerful because they walk away. They can't unknow that
Yeah,
stuff. They
true.
can't unknow that.
Hmm.
They have to live with that truth. They know what your emotions are now.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful, even though they might not show you at the time.
Yeah, and that's that whole you know, let them know and then you walk away. It's tough, man. That's that real love, not just tough love. How do you approach this with men that are because we're talking about a world of men that really at the most that we're not taught how to navigate emotion. We're not taught to talk about things. If anything, we're taught to keep it in, be tough, bottle it up. How do you find that you've been able to get some men to open up more than most do?
Yeah, we're sort of living through a revolution where I guess I don't know if you'd call it the new masculinity, but it's becoming brave and courageous to be honest and vulnerable about what your emotions might be. It's no longer looked at as a weakness or being a sissy or whatever it used to be, right? And I work with guys one on one, so there's no audience. There's nobody
Yeah,
judging them, and hopefully we can have a pretty good therapeutic relationship and developing that trust. And I love seeing these big tough firefighters that are just like having some serious vulnerable emotions, and it's so great just to help them to validate that and say, yeah, that doesn't mean anything bad about you. You're just having emotions that you should be having. There's nothing to fix,
yeah.
and we process it like that.
Gotcha. That definitely there's some validity to that too. I know there's some worlds that I walk in where that's not quite there yet, and I don't know if it ever will get there. I mean, like the NFL, for example, it's not, you're not gonna have a whole lot of guys in the NFL out there crying on the field like, but he really made me feel bad when he blocked this guy. There's worlds there's worlds that might never enter, but I think there's got to be something to it. Because here's the thing: it's not that we don't feel the emotion. I think we just have different ways of navigating in different places it expresses itself. Because there are worlds that like you may have it, and we'll validate you got it, but we don't need that in the boardroom right now, Bob. Like I get that you had some at
Yeah.
home, but Bob, we can't have you crying in here with the new staff. So there's places, but I think it's more of not just letting it go willy nilly, but understanding it and finding the people or the places to go have those moments to let it out, to express, because pressure busts pipes, man, and you got to make sure you can go find a place to let that stuff out so you don't bust a pipe in life, we'll call it.
Yeah, I'd agree, and that's kind of back to step 4, where the first steps have to do with the emotional brain and just naming those emotions and learning from
Mm-hmm.
them. But when we get to the step 4 of acting, that's when we get to tap back into our left brain, our logical
Yeah.
brain, and then we get to decide, what should I do? When should I do it? What action am I going to take? Who am I going to talk to? Who am I not going to talk to? So we still want to use our common sense and not just, throw it around like haphazardly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Smart, man. So, have we covered enough about the book? Because I feel like I don't have enough details about it. I know we have the 5 steps. Is that what's in the book, or is there more?
Yeah, it's the 5 steps, and it goes through that. A lot of this stuff becomes real in a person's
Yeah,
life when there's a lot of coaching
true.
involved. Now, I can't personally coach everybody that reads the book,
Hmm.
so the book employs some fictionalization of
Nice.
characters to try to really make it real, make it come to life,
Yeah.
so you can, relate to it, and it can become really powerful to help you change your own
Yeah, I
life.
think story is a big piece of that too, because when you hear information, sometimes you're not aware of how to process it or what to do, the next steps. And stories are they're a good platform for people to go, hey, here's the situation to understand. And so you can say this happened, she said this, he said this, then he did this, she did this, right? There's that back and forth. So in it, you're hearing what's going on, but you're also understanding what a proper interaction might be or might not be by sheerly hearing the story. So I think that's wise to be able to weave that kind of stuff in to help teach the concepts in it. Where can people get this book if they want to go find it right now, buy it right now? Where would I send them?
It's available for pre-sale right now. It's everywhere English books are sold. You can go into Amazon, type in "give a F" actually, and it should pop up for you. It's going to be released and distributed in early January, so depending on when you hear
Yeah.
this. And then you can also check out radicalemotionalacceptance.com.
Okay.
That's my website with more information about me and the book and merchandise stuff and all that, all those
All the good
things.
things, man. All of the stacks of stuff that people need. And I think if somebody is hearing it and they're going, this is something that resonates, it's always something where you never quite know how great something is until you get really into it. You're like, oh, that might be a good movie. And you start, you're like, oh, it's great. Like you get that little inkling, man. Go watch, go read, go
Yeah.
dive in. All right, final question. You ready for it?
All
Here we
right.
go. What promise did God or the creator make to the world when they created you?
You have the best questions.
I try,
You
man.
stump me. You stump me.
Those, yeah, like, someone hit me with that one time. And it's always been a question I close with because it opens up a little bit more than the logical brain.
Well, when I was a kid, my mom told me she named me Alexander, and I said, "What does that name mean?" And she said, "Helper of mankind."
Hmm.
And so that kind of always felt like it fit. I think it would mean nothing more to me than to be able to, leave the world better off than I found it in some ways. So, yeah.
I like it, man. Well said. I appreciate you hanging out with us, man. Those of you guys who are tuned in as well, make sure you go pick up the book, depending upon when you're listening to this. Go look it up in all the places because at the end of the day, this is something that we all need help with, myself included, right? Understanding a process to navigate the emotions that we all inherently experience. And sometimes your emotions are the things that hinder you from having the next tier of happy and joy emotions, right? Because you haven't learned how to navigate situations or show up the best in the ones you're in. So make sure you go and check out this book. And if there's someone in your life that you know needs to hear this podcast because you've been trying to reach them, somebody else is trying to reach them, but you can't. Well, sometimes the best thing you can do is introduce them to words like Dr. Will's words that can be the ones that kind of plant the seed that can grow into something great. That's it, man. I appreciate you coming on. And as always, make the most of your off shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Dr. Wills signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning into the Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.